Hi, I'm Joanne Wilson, the Interim Provost at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. I'm really excited that you are here today to discuss the future of advising at UW-Platteville. In particular, the mission that we have as an institution is to provide hands-on learning for our students, and that includes the advising process. Advising is so much more than building a schedule. It's about understanding what the students' wants and needs are, where they will be successful. And those are the things that we have been looking into in the past 6 months and past year. I'm really grateful for the staff that have committed time to this project already. As we move into the future, what we want to do is involve the campus in talking about where advising should be. So over the next 6 months, you will have the opportunity to get involved in those discussions. I encourage you to attend whenever you can so that we can make sure that our students are successful and our advising program becomes a university-wide commitment.
Hello, I'm Travis Nelson. I'm the professor in the political science program at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and I was a part of the Future of Advising project. This today is a presentation of the findings from Phase 1 of the Future of Advising project. This data was initially presented on campus on October 24th, 2017. So what is the Future of Advising project? First off, this project arose for several reasons. One, the campus had purchased new software, EAB software, and in looking at the software, it became clear that we could think more clearly about advising on campus. And this corresponded with the HLC visit on accreditation, where they also had points to make about advising, and then in general, we as a campus want to be more attuned to the needs of our students and to how the advising process is working. So this project is just a means of assessing where we're at with advising and figuring out where we want to go. As it says on the slide, the project came from a desire to better understand the advising experience of students, faculty, and staff, and to figure out how it is that we should move forward. As will be discussed more at the end of this presentation, the next phase of this Future of Advising project is going to involve input from across campus. We want and need input both on the findings themselves, kind of discussion of those findings, and on how to implement any of the conclusions that are drawn from these findings. And so I encourage you to listen to this presentation and think about your reaction to it and any input you have about advising at UW-Platteville. The project involved a team from across the university. There were representatives from all three colleges, BILSA, EMS, and LAE, and from individuals in enrollment and student success. There are two phases to the timeline of the project. Phase 1, which we have just completed, involves assessing the current state of advising on campus. That'll be the focus of this presentation. And Phase 2, envisioning the future, where we're asking you and asking everyone on campus to help us figure out where advising should go forward. First step, how did we get the data that we got to assess the current state of advising? There are 6 pieces of data that we gathered. First, on this slide, we look at assessments of faculty and staff. Where there was a survey of advisors on campus in the fall of 2016, a reasonably good response rate of 41% on that. Last spring 2017, we did focus groups. There were 5 focus groups, 1 for each college and 2 for supplemental or professional advisors. And all told, there were 26 participants in those focus groups, 17 faculty and 9 staff. And there was the spring 2017 advising process and communication audit. This involved interviews with academic departments, with chairs of academic departments, and with representatives from the dean's office, and we had wide participation in those as well. I should note that in this and everything else, more details are available on the website. Both about the methodology of how we determined how to do these assessments and what the results of these assessments were. There were two student assessments that we looked at. One was a retention survey from spring of 2015 that was administered in the college writing courses. This is mainly freshmen with also some sophomores. 1,085 respondents to that. And then an advising survey in spring 2017 that we had 387 respondents to that out of the students. So there's a student side. We also, although we won't discuss it here, we also looked at a broad benchmarking assessment of other peer and aspirational institutions. Again, that was something we looked at, but we're not going to discuss it in this presentation here. This slide is just an overview of the findings from this phase 1 of the project. Kind of what we did is we had these individual assessment pieces. As a team, we broke up into subgroups and worked on each of these pieces, and then regathered together as an overall team to come up with 3 findings, 3 broad findings, 3 themes, and 2 conclusions. The 3 themes, which we'll go over in the remainder of this presentation, are 1, faculty see advising is a critical component of student success, but more support is necessary. 2, about information critical to advising is not easily accessible to advisors. And 3, expectations and outcomes for advising need to be clearly articulated at all levels. Our 2 conclusions, 1, that there are a lot of specific action items, individual specific action items that we can work on more quickly, and 2, to address some broader structural concerns, we might need to think about advising being more clearly articulated in the RST process. First, though, the big picture. And the big picture is that we're not starting from zero here. The situation of advising on campus is okay. It's maybe even good that we have a lot of faculty and staff who are good advisors, who are committed to advising, and a lot of students who are getting a lot out of the advising process. There are certainly going to be things we can work on, but we have a lot of things that are working, and I think that's important for us to emphasize. As a part of this big picture, we can look at the 2017 Student Advising Survey. The students there were asked about their overall impression of the advising process. And there, as you can see here, 81% found advising to be generally helpful. And that's good. 81% of our students are finding what we do in advising helpful. That still leaves 19% of the students who find it unhelpful, which we'll get to, but 81% do find it helpful. One interesting part of this data, when you dig down into it a little, is that the highest ratings on this impression of advising metric were from juniors, and the lowest rating was from sophomores. So that was the biggest divergence, something between sophomore and junior year, which is interesting. But big picture, overall, 81% find advising helpful, 19% find it generally unhelpful. This slide has 2 illustrative quotes from that advising survey. On the positive side, we have a student writing that he, the advisor, is very helpful, makes sure that I'm all set to graduate on time. He even told me I'm only a few credits away from adding an emphasis, so I did. He sees things that I don't see and makes sure that I'm getting my money's worth while I'm here. That's good. On the flip side, the other quote, they, advisors, don't really get the basics of how you are doing. They focus strictly on passing the classes and not in how you are failing in the first place. Again, 2 quotes from the survey. The full report online has a lot more of these quotes that I know I found pretty interesting and illustrative to kind of look at as we think about advising on campus. But these are just 2. We can also look at that 19% number. That's the 19% of students who find advising generally unhelpful. And that 19% is significant for our institution in a number of ways. One way is simply that we shouldn't have 19% of our students finding the advising process unhelpful. But there are also other implications. That there is a financial implication for campus. That if we take, for instance, the fall 2016, there were 1,541 new freshmen. 19% of that number is 293 students. If 19% of students don't find advising helpful, that might be 19% of students who we are less likely to retain. If we don't retain those 293 students at Wisconsin tuition rates, that translates to $1.8 million. And for only 10 to 15 students that we don't retain, that's about a position's worth of tuition there. So there are academic implications to that 19%, and there are financial implications to that 19%. And all of that is something that we are and should be thinking about as an institution. On to the three themes that emerged from our looking at the data. The first theme, again, is that faculty do see advising as a critical component of student success, but they think that more support is necessary. To understand this theme, we can look at some quotes that came out of that survey and the focus groups of advisors. Here's one quote from the advisor survey. Academic advising is an invaluable practice. It is more important for the one-on-one interaction it provides student and faculty. It can strengthen confidence and offer perspectives impossible to gain in class time alone. I know myself that my favorite part of my job is the advising. That is where you really get to know students. And you get to better figure out what students need help, how you can help students, and how you can really help students not only succeed in college, but use their college experience to go forth into the world as citizens of the world and employees of the world. So I think advising is super important, and this quote definitely helps sum up my perspective on advising. Two more positive quotes from the survey and the focus groups. One of the things that makes UW-Platteville special is that faculty have a more student-centered role. It's a good idea to keep faculty in that mentorship role. It's certainly one of the things we brag about as an institution, that we are student-centric, that faculty have a one-on-one connection with students. And if we are going to actually achieve that thing that we're talking about, we have to make sure advising on campus is working. The other quote, each time I meet with a student, I go over what they have taken, what they have remaining, and check for success and needs. It takes time, but it is worth that time. I really get to know my students. And I think here it is worth noting that advising does indeed take a time. It's a part of my job I love, and it's also a part of my job that takes up a bunch of my time. And as we'll get to later in this presentation, since it takes so much of our time, it's probably, as faculty and staff members, it's probably something that we should be both evaluated on and rewarded for. That it's an important part of our jobs and it's important for our students. Here are a few more negative quotes from the advisors. Says one advisor, students waiting to be advised are like a cattle run. I've got a line of 5 out the door. I've certainly experienced that. I wish there was more advising training. As a new hire, I've only received informal training and have had to individually figure out advising procedures. And a third quote, I wish the scheduling part of it wasn't something I had to spend so much time on. It would be more useful to me to mentor than schedule. This has been a part of a discussion with having professional advisors on campus. In some cases, those professional advisors take more of a role in the scheduling part of advising, leaving faculty to take more of a role in the mentoring part of advising. And as a campus, that divide and that role of professional advisors is something I think we should continue to think about. I also think it's important to recognize that different advisors and different programs have different needs, that there are different amounts of time available for advising, and different needs for what is involved in the advising process. And I think certainly as a campus community, we cannot have a myopic one-size-fits-all approach. We have to recognize the differences among advisors and the differences among programs. The second overall theme from all the pieces of data is that information critical to advising is not necessarily easily accessible to advisors. And there's two parts to this. On the one hand, you have sort of new or newish advisors versus seasoned advisors. And the newish advisors don't necessarily have same easy access to that kind of information. But even for the more seasoned advisors, for all of us, you don't always necessarily know what you don't know. You don't know what information is out there for you, or so you don't even know the questions to ask. And so that there is a lot of different types of information that really is important to advising that can be difficult to access, or you don't even know to access. I mean, both of those are important. 3 particular types of information came out of both the focus groups and the discussions with deans and department chairs. One is that there are some locally created materials that could either be adapted to other areas or just directly shared with advisors in other areas. One thing that came up here often was something that general engineering puts together. Which is a list of courses for different gen ed areas that are available in a given semester. That was something that was mentioned that was useful, but could be shared more broadly. The second type of information is information on specific advising topics. I know for me, one of these is transfer students. That advising for transfer students is difficult. I had a student in my office just like a week ago who transferred in, but all of her credits came in as one-credit courses, so she looked like she had a tremendous amount of time left. It was in somewhat of a panic state, and I had to kind of figure out how to deal with that. That transfer students are always difficult, or there are other kinds of advising topics, specific advising topics that take a little bit of specialized information that you don't necessarily know. The third clump here, which I also think is significant, is information about your advisees. It was interesting in the student advisor survey. One thing students wanted more of from their advisor was discussion of midterm grades, mid-semester grades. And that was interesting. But as an advisor, I know that piece of information is something that is a little weirdly difficult to access. That is either time-consuming or difficult to kind of get those students' mid-semester grades. But if that is something that students want and something that I, as an advisor, have a difficult time accessing, that is a piece of information that could be shared more clearly. And so that kind of information, or information about advisees that are at risk for various reasons, might be another piece of information that advisors might want. Third theme, that expectations and outcomes for advising need to be clearly articulated at all levels. This includes a basic definition of what advising is, that for both students and for faculty staff, we as a campus could be clear about what goes into advising and what exactly students and faculty staff should expect from the advising process. So the definition of advising, and the outcomes for advising all need to be more clearly articulated. We can think, for instance, of those 19% of students from the student survey who are generally unhappy with their advising experience. We know that 19% number came up. We don't know why those 19% were unhappy with their experience. What's going on? Was it that those students had a legitimately bad experience with the advising process, with their advisor? Was it that there was a personality clash, a style difference was going on? Or was it that the students involved had an unreasonable expectation of what they were going to get out of that advising session? Were they unhappy with advising because they were expecting something other than what academic advising is? In high school, for instance, the closest thing that a student has to an academic advisor is a guidance counsel, and it's just not the same thing when they come to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. And so we could think more about how we're orienting students to the advising process, how we could be doing a better job advising and orienting those students, and looking at students who switch majors, who change majors between entering college and graduating. How do we help those students? I think it's also interesting that we have those 19% of students who are generally unhappy with their advising experience, and we don't know why that happens. We could also look at the 81% of students who are generally happy with their advising experience. It's certainly possible that some of them are happy with their experience because they have unreasonably low expectations of what advising is, and that they maybe perhaps should expect more than they're getting from that. Point being that all students, happy and unhappy, we could look more at the advising experience, what their expectations are for it, and how we can better improve the outcomes of advising. This slide is an interesting piece of data from the retention survey. If you look on the left here, that's an overall rating of students' descriptions of their advising process. That the percentage who describe that advising positively, 77% provide positive descriptors, 26% provide negative descriptors. That number adds up to more than 100% because some students had both positive and negative things to say. But you had 77% that said positive things, 26% said negative things. Where it's interesting is on the right side. If we disaggregate those numbers by the students that perceive themselves as doing well, doing okay, or struggling academically. You can see that by far, The highest number of students who had negative descriptions of the advising experience also described themselves as struggling academically. We obviously don't know enough to have cause and effect in the situation, but there's something going on there, that students who are struggling academically, who see themselves as struggling academically, also see themselves as having a negative experience with the advising process. We can see a similar sort of thing in this slide, also from the retention survey in spring 2015, which looks at the frequency of perceived student contact with their advisors. On the left-hand side, overall, 10% of students surveyed report, this is, again, students in college writing classes in the spring semester, report seeing their advisor regularly, 73% report seeing their advisor infrequently, 17% report seeing their advisor never. Since this took place after registration for courses, it seems unlikely that those students have actually not had contact with their advisor, but perhaps that they didn't have a sense of who their advisor was and who this person was they were contacting. But there's some kind of miscommunication going on there. Regardless, the interesting thing here is on the right-hand side, that students who see themselves as struggling academically also report infrequent or never interaction with their advisor. So perhaps that is those struggling students are a set of students who need or could use more and more significant contact with their advisors in the advising process. Data on this slide is from the advisors. It comes out of the advisor survey in the fall of 2016, and it looks at what advisors see themselves as actually doing, what they actually do. The percentage of advisors surveyed who checked off having employed different advising practices. And you can look at that, but you can see there's a range of things, from pin distribution at the top to review of midterm grades at the bottom, and things like mentoring and career counseling in the middle. Kind of what I take away from this is that being an advisor means having a lot of hats. There's a lot of things on this list, a lot of things that we're doing, which means a lot of different pieces of information that we need, means a lot of time doing these things, and a lot of support that we're giving to their students. So a lot goes into advising, and that's important to think about, and important for us, again, to have that conversation about what exactly advising is. This is a quote that came out of the focus group, a discussion with advisors, that is illustrative and provocative of kind of the whole process, that advising can be a lottery. It can be a lottery for the students who don't know what advisor they're going to get. It can be a lottery for the advisor, where you don't know anything about the student coming in. How prepared is the student going to be for your advising appointment? How much does the student understand what advising is? That there is a lottery element to a lot of that process. Overall, this theme leads us to a few important questions. One, what is the responsibility of the university to support advisors? Two, what are the basic expectations of an advisor? And three, what are the expectations of students during the advising process? Expectations in both directions. How do students learn about their expectations? And then finally, as a regional teaching-focused institution with a self-described commitment to using a personal, hands-on approach to empowering each student, how do we ensure a positive advising experience for all of our students, and how are we delivering on our promise? This is something that is important for us to think about, and is important for us to demonstrate to accreditors like HLC. Those were the three big themes that came out of our data. Then we also arrived at two conclusions. First conclusion involves specific action items. We kind of identified some individual specific action items the university can get working on now to improve advising for both students and advisors. Those specific action items are listed here. I'll just highlight here that the fifth one about improving cross-campus communication about curriculum changes. We've gone through a lot of curriculum and other changes, and I think communication is something that we can work on improving as a campus. And the sixth one, finding opportunities to provide advisors with timely and needed information about their advisees. From progress reports to at-risk indicators, this is also something I think is important. I encourage you to read all of these action items, and at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about what you can do to provide input on them. Both input on them as important items and input on how exactly to implement these action items. Second conclusion is about broader structural concerns. And the future advising team concluded that to address some of these broader structural concerns, advising needs to be more clearly articulated in the RST process. I know that when I put together my RST documents, my retention promotion documents, it was always a bit of a puzzle of where to put advising activities. Advising was something I thought was important and that took up a lot of my time. But was it a service part of my service obligations? Was it part of my teaching? Where exactly did it fit? And how was I going to be evaluated on it? What were the expectations of it? That I put it in there, and it was a part of my file, but that wasn't exactly clearly articulated as a part of the RST process. The caveat at the bottom is important to note, though, that we feel that while this is important and is an important finding, the whole team certainly recognizes that RST is a faculty concern and that needs to be addressed through the governance structures, the departmental governance structures. Right now, this is just a suggestion of something that we consider more carefully as a campus of where and how advising fits as a part of the RST process. Finally, how can you offer input? The next stage of this process clearly involves input from the entire campus community about how we can take this data and go the next step forward in closing the loop and doing something with it. So, what can you do? How can you stay involved? First, you can listen to this presentation, which you are presumably doing now. And in addition, you can read the advising report. The report is available at the website at the bottom. And it really does have a lot of interesting pieces of data, and as I mentioned earlier, interesting quotes from students of advisors that really have helped me better understand what's going on campus. So be aware of the current state of advising from the report and this presentation. Second, provide feedback online through the website. You visit the website and you can see how to provide feedback to the Future of Advising team. And third, we would love you to participate in discussions that are going to happen at the Future of Advising engagement sessions. There are 2 more remaining engagement sessions on Tuesday, September 19th and Wednesday, October 25th. Please do visit the website for more information about those engagement sessions and more details about the location of them. Again, we want the entire campus to be involved in this. I think advising is really important for us as a campus, important for our students, and this project is an important part of making that happen. Thank you.